At a time we are dealing with numerous challenges in our nation, from the killings of young persons to the economic turmoil that we are facing, to numerous and various problems that the nation Kenya faces, I am here to give you unfiltered insight into these issues, one by one, as we delve into the details of these occurrences. My name is Chris Kushu, and this is my unfiltered insights. Of all the administrations we have had in this republic, of the governments we have had in this republic, the 5 governments, there is but one government that has been the worst, and that was the Jubilee government. This is a government that combined all the bad aspects of all the governments Kenya has ever had, put them together, came up with a better strategy to be bad at governance, and elevated it and polished it and brought it out to be effective in terms of destroying this nation. The one government that has single-handedly destroyed this nation was the Jubilee government. Don't be fooled by the roads that were done by that government. Don't be fooled by the rural electrification that was done by that government. Because we must ask ourselves, when we develop our nation, at what cost are we doing it? And by saying the Jubilee government, I mean even the current government, because it was just the same people who were in that government who got to power in a different time. Because I believe it is a continuation of the Jubilee government, because it was the same wolves who changed their coats from a red to a white coat, or from a red to a yellow coat. So there is no distinction there. And to understand how damaging and ravaging that government has been to this nation, you have to take a look at the corruption scandals that have plagued that government since its inception in 2013. And we blundered from the word go when we, as Kenyans and as voters, elected indictees of the ICC, persons who are accused of crimes against humanity. I mean, how did we expect better? But anyway, it was the worst government we have ever had. It is still the worst government that we have ever had. This is a government that took over the reins of power and found money in treasury with very minimal debt. This is a government that took over from a government that had laid the proper structuring for the development of the nation. They even had a roadmap drawn for them, Vision 2030, on how to develop the country. This is a government that had no other job but to follow the ultimate plan and ensure those projects were implemented. They came in with projects like the SGR, which was a good idea, but was not their idea. It was formulated by the Kibaki government, by the technocrats of that government. But they came in, and the devil was in the details. Implementing that project was the way to go. But how it was implemented is what hurts the economy of this nation. A project that was supposed to be funded locally with tax concessional agreements and to cost just 450 billion ended up costing over 700 billion shillings, a double inflation for the same project that was earmarked for 450 billion. Yet, the proposed 450 billion expenditure was for the railway to move from Mombasa all the way to the Malava border. But the railway ended up in Naivasha in a single individual's farm and never got to extend to Malava, yet at a double cost or even a triple cost that it was supposed to cost the country. And all this was done by external debt, which we are paying to date with a lot of defaults. So far, the fines for the default of the SGR loan are up almost 45 billion Kenya shillings. We are at a loss as a country because 45 billion shillings can do a lot. And to get and paint the exact picture of how that government was the worst and has been the worst for the nation. The national debt stood at 2 trillion shillings by the time Mwai Kibaki was leaving government. And by the time he was handing over the reins of power to these two young men. But by the time the Jubilee government was taking a break from power to go into elections and another clique of persons who were in that government to take over power, we were at over 9 trillion Kenya shillings, more than triple or even almost fivefold, actually fivefold of what Kibaki had left. Now, these are some of the scandals that plague that administration and that actually exposed the rot in that administration. In 2014 March, a scandal broke out of 24.6 billion Kenya shillings of the laptop scandal, which was cancelled, and there was absolutely no prosecution of the same. 24 billion shillings could do at least level 6 national hospitals in at least 6 or 7 counties. I mean, the Kenyatta University Referral Hospital was constructed by a meager 2.5 billion shillings, with all the equipments included. And seeing the significance and impact of that hospital, you definitely know this would have had an impact in the health sector of the nation. The Eurobond scandal broke during the Uhuru Kenyatta administration and the Jubilee government. And the country borrowed 250 billion shillings to finance infrastructure projects, which is done by a lot of countries. But out of the 250 billion shillings, 100 billion shillings vanished into thin air. To date, nobody has ever been indicted. To date, nobody has ever been convicted of that crime. To date, the person who tried to blow the whistle on that scandal is 6 feet under the ground, dying under unclear circumstances. 100 billion shillings could have changed the infrastructure of the nation, especially in those years, considering the rate of inflation then, considering the exchange rate then. It would have done wonders in the infrastructure of this nation. NYS had scandals running to over 2 billion shillings, with clear suspects, with individuals in that government being mentioned in those scandals clearly by witnesses who were caught transporting money in sacks. Yet those officials went ahead to become elected and appointed officials in the nation, being defended by that very regime because they were perpetrating the very blueprint of the governance of that regime. When it came to the Lamu project, which was crucial for the LAPSET project that was part and parcel of the Vision 2030, creating a northern corridor that would have earned Kenya in billions of shillings in terms of revenue and impacting growth along the northern corridor, 475 billion shillings disappeared because the wrong coal company was awarded the tender. 475 billion shillings. Get that into your head and try and wrap your mind around how much impact that would have had. The new terminal at JKIA was plagued by an irregular tendering process, and 55.6 billion Kenya shillings was lost. Again, I want you to think of how many classrooms that would have constructed. I want you to think of how many roads that would have done in the northeastern region. I want you to think of how much development that would have impacted in the northern parts of this republic. I want you to think of what impact in agriculture 55.6 billion shillings would have had in terms of developing food security in this nation. The chicken scandal, the printing of ballot papers, 50 million shillings was lost. While their counterparts in the UK were convicted, the counterparts in Kenya went ahead and were appointed as CSs. And in the successive Jubilee government, they are actually CSs. Then in came the current land saga that costed the nation 8 billion Kenya shillings. That regime was marred by corruption, losing more than 2 billion shillings per day. Per day. That was over 500 billion shillings per year by the confessions of the then President Uhuru Kenyatta. That regime has costed this country so much that only the amount they had lost through corruption, if it would have been put in development projects in this nation, we would be a breath away from the Singapore dream. We would be a breath away from being a developed country. We would not be talking about constructing roads in our political campaigns, because majority of the road networks would have been done, because the stadiums that had been promised by that regime would have been done. And I know some of you will come at me and tell me there's the Raila Odinga or Talanta Stadium being constructed. Go look at the costs of that particular project. The stadium is costing 45 billion shillings. And you even look at the seats that are being installed, they are plastic seats, while Uganda's cost half of that, or at least slightly over half of that, and has better seats. VIP seats in the whole stadium, yet ours has plastic seats being installed. And the catch is in the payment of the bond that was used to construct Atlanta Stadium. A stadium of 45 billion shillings, a bond of 45 billion shillings, will be paid at an interest which will eventually in 15 years cost the country an extra 100 billion in interests. It doesn't make sense. The Jubilee government has been the greatest undoing of this nation. Right now, our national debt stands at over 12 trillion. The current continuation of the Jubilee government, the extension of that government, which is the Kenya Kwanza government, plans in the next financial year to borrow almost 1 trillion shillings locally. That means if you run a business in this country, it will be very hard for you to access credit in the local market, because you're competing against the giant, the government of the republic. You cannot win that battle. The bank will lend the government before lending you the money. That means there will be reduced finance ability in the nation to the businesses of the republic, which hold up the economy of the nation. That means those businesses that are meant to thrive by finding easy financing in banks will collapse or may reduce their operations in the country, meaning reduced employment, meaning reduced cash flow, because with the amount of debts accumulated by the Jubilee government, and by extension the Kenya Kwanza government, which has so far borrowed over 4 trillion shillings, most of that money that will be borrowed locally will be used to service those debts. The mirage of becoming a Singapore of Africa is far-fetched, because the principles of good governance have been thrown outside the window. And all this is a curse laid by the Jubilee government. The damage that government has cost us, the damage of the individuals and politicians who served in that government and serve in the government of today has cost us, is unimaginable. And the country will bleed for many years to come because of that regime. And for us to never get there again, we must reorganize ourselves as Kenyans. We must register as voters, for those of us who have not registered, in large numbers, and ensure that no politician who was in the Jubilee administration ever sees the light of day in the Kenyan political arena. They must never be elected into power again. Any person from the MCA to governor to the rest of the politicians in this country, if they served in the Jubilee government, they are rotten to the core, because that is the most damaging and most ravaging administration this country has ever had. And anyone associated with it must be removed from the political arena and the governance of this nation for the country to move forward. That is my unfiltered insight.